What's up, everybody? Happy Friday.
Yo.
Welcome to another week of Freight Gong Friday. We got Garrett from Load Partner joining us today. We're going to do a little bit of a different style, different vibe. We're going to go do some deep dives into some freight tech related things today. There's been a decent amount of news with some interesting companies floating around, working on pretty cool things. And this is going to be like a little bit more of a technical discussion. So hopefully,
before we talk about anything, can you guys hear me first of all?
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
All right, great. Before we talk about anything about anyone else, Garrett, what the heck's going on with you, dude?
Yeah. So doing good, man. Yeah. So for anybody not familiar with Load Partner, basically, AI enablement for logistics, building out automating track and trace essentially for freight. So basically anything from a dispatch truck to delivered, we have a system that can help make check calls, phone calls, texts, etc., conversations with drivers, and just kind of like automate that whole flow. And
how when did you start working on it? Was it in July? It was in July or thereabouts, right?
So Load Partner, we officially launched Load Partner in February. But yeah, like towards the end of last year, we kind of like started like, especially like in Lost Freight and everything, we really started to like kick it off.
I'm just trying to remember when you were just like started poking around with just the idea.
Yeah. It was like mid last year. Some prototyping and stuff. I think a lot of people, especially like in Lost Freight, saw the early demos of basically like the chat conversation where it was like three-way and you could like ask questions and it would do things and obviously come.
Look at how far you've come.
Oh yeah,
it's exciting, dude.
All kinds of stuff we do. Images, like I said, phone calls and texts, the whole platform and everything.
How many? And is it just you and Nick still?
Yeah. So it's just me and Nick, and then we have a couple contractors helping with other stuff.
Nice. Okay.
Cool. So it's been good though. It's any startup, it's always a roller coaster.
Is what's harder, sales or building?
Definitely sales. Definitely sales. Not even close. I would love to be locked in the dungeon writing code 24 hours a day. That would be
if only that were how it worked.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Honestly, I will say this though, that I used to be like a dungeon, lock myself away in a dungeon type of, and just like keep building. And then I forced myself to have to start doing sales for Shipper CRM. And I actually found it to be quite fun when you talk with a lot of people. So it's on the other side of the street in terms of what kind of looks like. It's a very different like day. Like it's not this is what I'm used to in terms of like work, but it definitely
talking to people.
Yeah, not something that was in my normal in my previous life. But
I do like. Yeah, I like the sales side of it. I do like getting the feedback and hearing people's pain points and like that side of it, especially. Like I definitely do enjoy that. I think really, like at heart, I'm really just like a problem solver. I know it's kind of like cliche, but like I just like hearing people's problems and figuring out ways to like solve them. Kind of, it's at the heart of it all. So I like that part of sales of like hearing like how does this help you and like how can we tweak this to be even better. Like I love that stuff.
Yeah, the way that I've found so far is that I'm not really I am trying to obviously close sales, but at the same time, I'm just simply talking to them from a similar pain point that I used to have. And I found that to be quite relatable. It makes it much easier flowing conversations usually. And so it doesn't really feel like, that's why it doesn't really feel too much like work. It's like, I'm just having a conversation with a lot of people, telling them about, hey, I was in your position before, whatever, So, yeah, it's. I guess maybe I found a way to make it enjoyable so far. So that's cool though. But it's glad to hear that, Garrett.
Yeah, I'm proud of you, bro.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been interesting too because with Load Partner, obviously it's so AI first, and that's so polarizing anymore. And a lot of the sales side, especially, is interesting because we get a lot of people that come to us that just like they're like, we want to do AI stuff, but we don't really know like what is AI. And so, we found that a lot of our sales cycle is honestly just educating people on kind of like what's out there and like how you can use it. So
How have you found the models and just interfacing with the various AI providers? How has that changed since you started? Like, have things gotten better? What's changed?
Yeah. I would say there's more options now, especially with like Anthropic and Claude. They just launched the Claude 3.5 Sonnet model, which just got awesome benchmarks. And
Better
so there's a
than
lot more options. So, that's one of the things early on, obviously with Load Partner, is we built it really like vendor agnostic. So you could plug in,
Yeah.
we can really quickly switch to different AI vendors as needed, and that's really paid off because it's gotten better. And like this new Anthropic model, we can like plug it into different areas of the product and see how it performs better. And there's a lot more redundancy, right? We don't have to like just rely on OpenAI because they've got kind of a spotty track record for uptime over the last like year or so. So it's good to have like fallbacks and stuff. So overall, it's definitely better, I think. And overall, the vendors are trending towards making it more less of just like a chat conversation and more of like providing an interface to call tools and functions and have a little more consistency. So they've made it easier for us for sure.
I don't know what you guys think about this, but like OpenAI has been on this like weird path, I would say, in the last like couple of months. It feels a little bit like
Like a soap opera.
Soap opera for sure would be
Yeah.
one way to put it. But I see that they're now trying to basically, they're actually giving early access models also to the military before they give it out to the public as well. And then they're also trying to kind of push pretty hard for regulation kind of around these models, at least for like the state of the art stuff. It's getting a little bit, it feels like it's getting a little bit weird. And if that takes place, like, then a lot of these benefits that might, some people are trying to bring to our industry potentially might, be delayed. I feel like there's a lot of efficiency gain that can be kind of extracted out of all of this, especially in paper, kind of a very manual type business, that being freight. But I don't know. It seems like
Yeah.
things are getting kind of weird.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, and I definitely feel like the soap opera comment is pretty accurate. It's like every week or so, you see like some new major leader or executive or somebody leaving or joining OpenAI. It's like always something new, and the regulation stuff too is definitely something to keep an eye on because that could have a huge impact on a lot of these companies, like, including Load Partner, and just like how much we can actually work with OpenAI depending on like how much they push for certain regulations and stuff. And I do appreciate, companies like Meta that are trying to push more of the open source angle on this and, put it more into the hands of like us, everyday people that can really build our own models out and have a little bit more control end to end.
Isn't Meta making it open source kind of just like a attack vector on OpenAI? Like, I mean, that's basically kind of what it is, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're behind, like, so OpenAI is like clearly the leader in the space, right? But how do you catch up? You basically just make their products like a commodity and make it free.
Yeah.
And Meta doesn't care. They don't need to make money on it. You know what I mean? Like, and they've got other ways of monetizing, AI. And
I have a feeling it's going to end up something like most people aren't, at least in this industry, they're not familiar with an operating system called Linux. But basically, every app that you use on the internet, in the background, it is running not on Windows.
Every web server.
Yeah, essentially every web server for the most part is not running on Windows. It's not running on Mac. It's running on an operating system called Linux. And I think that these AI models, to Reed's point, are very likely going to go down that path where Linux is free and open source, right? And there's a huge community of people, of researchers, of security vulnerability testers, people that go in and actually refine and kind of poke holes into this platform that now basically powers the entire world. Whether that's going to be Meta, whether that's going to be maybe XAI if they release an open source model, I'm not sure, right? But I think that it is going to go in that direction. And it would be good to know, like, how are these models built? How are they trained? What type of, where is the data actually coming from? How are they learning bias? Because there is bias kind of inherent in these models. And I'm sure everybody at this point probably saw one of those bloopers from, Google's original models that were coming out, and asking it to paint a picture of George Washington, and it's a black George Washington. So it's like stuff like this. It's very important for the community to understand how these models are getting trained, so that they are safe, for public use. That can be used for bad purposes too. But anyway, in some light of some news from this week, maybe some of us thought that some of the self-driving truck companies went bankrupt. There's been a lot that have already.
Yeah, that one company rose. What's
Yeah.
$200 million? Wabi, is that how you say it?
Yeah. So Wabi
wasn't the founder on? I'm pretty sure I saw her on What the Truck. I might have been on the same day as her or something like
might
that.
have been.
Yeah.
So the founder of Wabi used to actually be. She used to be at Uber's self-driving team, Uber ATG. Raquel. She's based in Canada, I believe, or at least they originally were. And so Uber basically divested. They divested the team to Aurora. Some people basically didn't go to Aurora. They started Wabi. She was the founder, and so out of nowhere,
is that like a bolt-on to? Yeah. Okay.
It seems like it's a bolt-on, but most likely this is going to be, it's going to kind of be like hey, like on Microsoft, I'm going to Dell, and I want to sell Dells with pre-installed with Windows.
Yeah.
It's going to be some type of an arrangement like that. One thing that's kind of new is that I have yet not seen somebody do is actually in the front grille. They actually replaced with a kind of like a custom cutout for the grille, and they have LiDAR here and what seems to be like a radar. And so these trucks have a plurality of sensors. At least the self-driving trucks, they all pretty much use like the same types of sensor stacks, and they very heavily rely on lasers, on what's called LiDARs.
So I was I guess I'll be the first to admit that I'm like very ignorant about all this stuff. My only experience, I'll just say that I'm ignorant. But I listened to the Elon biography, whatever, and there was a part where they were talking about self-driving and how Elon like basically told them to get rid of everything that wasn't vision.
Yep.
Right? Like vision is their only method. And his thought process was, well, humans drive by seeing. Why can't machines too? Why do we need all this other crap? Basically, sounded like you said.
Yeah.
Is that stupid, or is that like legitimate, like a legitimate thought process?
Well, at the time, everybody that I ever talked to when it was 2016 roughly, and that's basically kind of when Tesla made the decision to install cameras by default on all cars. Now, fast forwarding 8 years? Basically, so I have a Model 3. It has FSD. I now drive around Chicago and I don't touch the car. And there is no radars. There's no ultrasonic sensors on it. It is purely cameras. It takes left turn intersections on the lights. It merges from one highway.
Are you ever just like clenched? Just like, shit, am I going to die? Like,
no. Actually, surprisingly, no. It does make occasionally, like in downtown, there's some pretty difficult scenarios. Like even I don't really know where to go if I'm driving myself. But no, so far I haven't clenched my cheeks. Yet, but
I do think honestly, like with the vision thing too, like there's a lot to be said about like building under really stringent like constraints like that forcing engineers to get creative. Like there's measurable benefit there, I think, right? So whether Elon's crazy for saying something like that or not, I don't know, but I mean I think that what they've built's pretty impressive. So it seems like it worked basically.
Well, it's like it's a very, his thought process was very simple, And I feel like that's you're right about constraints for sure.
100%.
Like what? So something like this, does it use a mixture of camera and laser? Like,
Yeah.
or are there more, or is it those two?
Yeah. So the way that most of the truck companies do it, and the tech is very different, I would say, from that of how Tesla is building it. But they use lasers to basically kind of compensate for the lack of driving data that they have compared to, for example, somebody like a Tesla, right? Tesla has millions of cars driving around, and they're literally recording videos, billions of miles of driving scenarios that they can then use and recreate, like kind of scenery and simulations and stuff like this, right? But the smaller, like these self-driving truck companies, as well as like probably Waymo, the Google self-driving car company, as well as GM's, General Motors self-driving car company, they operate in very like limited, confined zones, right? So on trucks, they operate in specific lanes, or in cars, they'll operate in specific cities, and then their plan is to expand city by city. So what they'll do is they'll compensate for the lack of vision camera data that they have access to train on with the lasers, and they kind of use them in combination together to kind of offset some of the shortcomings of both. So lasers, they can't see color. Cameras can see color, but they aren't as great at seeing it at depth. So they kind of use those two things together. Now, what Elon said controversially in 2016 was that, just like you said, Reed, like if humans can drive with their eyes, so should machines be able to, right? And at that time, generative AI wasn't even a thing back then, right? It was simply like computer vision was the hot topic, I remember, in 2016. Text, LLMs, like forget it. That wasn't even like, nobody even paid attention to that stuff yet. And so they, rightfully so, decided that we first fundamentally have to solve the vision problem, because there's so much more information when you actually take into consideration color. And they were right, completely right about it. So now these self-driving truck companies, the timelines that they're giving for these deployments, I think always have been very optimistic, more optimistic than they should be. But really what it boils down to, and this is like regardless of whether you agree with self-driving trucks as a concept or not, really what it boils down to is, are they traveling enough miles to prove that you don't need to intervene in order to actually have control over them, right? And so you need to drive billions of miles in order to prove that it's working, right? And I mean, Tesla right now, they finally started giving FSD to more Tesla customers. And I think they just now crossed 2, maybe 3 billion total driven miles on FSD. And it still makes occasional mistakes, right? So even at 2 billion, 3 billion miles, that system still needs some level of supervision. Whereas these, like if you, for example, are a self-driving truck company, you have 20 trucks or 30 trucks, maybe 50 trucks, right? Each truck does 100,000 miles a year. So it's going to take them much longer to get to that point. And I think the reason that Wabi was able to raise $200 million was because they basically, Raquel and her team came up with a way to actually be able to create a new type of simulation environment based on the data that they're collecting from the drive. And this simulation environment was very different than anything that was kind of used before, because it was actually recreated off of the driving data itself. And that will allow them to basically then go in and kind of more closely simulate the real world, as opposed to kind of like handcrafting and placing cars manually, yourself, and designing kind of like a world where the world is very unpredictable. So you can't really know how to build that world. So I think that's why, self-driving truck funding died for a while. And then all of a sudden these guys come out and raise $200 million from some pretty notable investors too, like Uber, Coastal Ventures. I think NVIDIA participated in there too. Of course, NVIDIA would, because $200 million for them is like chump change at this point. But anyway, yeah, I thought this was pretty interesting. So the tech behind all of this has always been.
Garrett, what's your take on all this stuff?
Yeah, so I see that I noticed that they mentioned generative AI quite a bit in here. I wonder, I've talked before about like with providers like Grok, not Twitter X Grok, but the chip provider, making like LLMs, for example, able to, process so much faster and potentially opening up more like robotics use cases and things like that. I'm wondering, what level of generative AI they're using in this tech here, as far as I think it mentioned that they can reason like humans. Like, what kind of like data points are they pulling in that they're reasoning against? Like, are they taking into account like weather and stuff like that? I don't know, Christian. I know you've been a lot more in the autonomous truck zone. Like, is that looking at like telematics on how a truck moves and like self-driving? Do they take into account stuff like weather or like what goods are in the back and stuff like that, or is it a lot simpler than that? And I'm wondering if that's one of the differences with this company.
Yeah. So, for example, like if I'm in FSD right now and I'm using it and it does start to rain, then there's a little icon that says like full self-driving is degraded, right? So there's a shortcoming there around, sensing in adverse weather conditions. And I actually don't think that that's something that's specific to just Tesla with a camera-only approach. LiDARs can't see through rain either, because it's basically a beam of light that gets sent out and then kind of like bounces back to the sensor. And if it gets sent out and it hits a drop or particle like of rain or something like that, right, it gets diffracted and you basically can't see anything beyond that droplet of rain. So the weather problem is difficult to solve, even if you use multiple different sensors. Now, radar is one sensor that's often been used in the past to compensate for rain, because radar is capable of actually kind of it doesn't matter whether or not it's raining or not. It uses a different type of frequency to sense, and radar is usually the one that's been utilized for the purpose of like rain or even snow. I'd say so. That's why like at least these companies, they start off with a bunch of different sensors, but at the core of it, it always comes back down to like, if you don't solve vision first, which is the fundamental thing, you can always add on sensors later. But if you don't solve vision first, then you haven't really solved the core of the problem. But yeah, I guess in terms of how this works from like the generative AI perspective, like how you can think about it. One way to I'll try to paint the picture or example of this is like when you use ChatGPT right now, you give it some prompt, you ask it some question, and then basically generates some text, right? And so the way that this would work for, let's say, like a simulator, maybe that Wabi created, is that you give it, instead of text as an input, you give it some sequence of images, which makes up a video. And you pass that in, and then you tell it with maybe some text additionally as the input, kind of like alongside the video, hey, slightly manipulate the car or the truck to start off maybe a little bit to the right of where it did start in the lane, right? And then basically the output, instead of generating a bunch of text like ChatGPT would, it would basically start to generate you a modified version of the video that you gave it as an input. And we've seen this actually, like these video modification tools, like or video generation tools, right? Like you can literally type. Actually, even OpenAI has a thing called Sora now, where you'll type in text of a video that you want created, and then the video will just simply get generated for you. So it's kind of things are getting into the realm where it's like, it really doesn't matter whether it's an image, whether it's text, whether it's audio, regardless of the input, it all kind of looks like zeros and ones to the computer at the end of the day. And you can just combine all these things together now in tandem to basically get whatever type of output you'd like, whether that's image, video, audio, text, it doesn't matter. So yeah.
Is that basically, so I guess the generative AI side of this is specifically for their like simulated world scenario, basically, is what it sounds like. Like they're using that Gen AI to okay, got it. That makes a little more sense to me. Okay.
Yeah, and they're using that to generate new scenarios off the data that they collected.
Got it.
Yeah. So it's just like, if you're driving down a lane on the highway, it would be, if you want to really simulate that properly, you kind of want to change the position of where the truck is,
Yeah.
right? And the generative AI allows you to do that.
That makes a lot of sense. It seems like a great way to basically, going back to your point of like getting the miles, right, to train on, seems like a great way to shortcut some of that. So that's
Yeah.
cool.
Because like I think we would all feel more comfortable knowing that the system is safe if, let's say, it drove, it had there was an injury one time every 10 billion miles, right? And 10 billion miles, that's a lot of, that's a serious amount of driving, all across, especially on one lane. Like if it's 10 billion miles that you drove on one lane, like I would say, okay, I think I think 10 billion miles would be, I think 10 billion miles would be slightly safer than like a Boeing 747 safety record, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe a little bit more than that, but um, it needs to certainly at least be as safe as a plane, if not more safe,
Yeah.
or at least safer than the new Boeings that are coming off the line.
Yeah.
But now this is like on the truck side of things, but there was something that we were talking in the Lost Freight Discord this week on Tech Pro Tuesday, which is kind of on the trailer side of things, which also people found to be pretty interesting. So I wanted to pull that up here. And now this is something very new. It is a company called Revoy, which basically built. Reed, how would you describe this? I didn't do a great job describing this on.
Yeah, I mean,
Tuesday.
it's basically just like it's just like it's like a battery and motor unit that is has a kingpin, like has all the hookups to slot into a normal trailer spot on a tractor, and it sits between, instead of hooking the tractor right to the trailer like you normally would, this thing like slots in between, and basically when you're on the road driving, it provides like almost like a hybrid functionality where it'll use the battery and the motor to provide boost while you're driving. I don't know if it means that the motor or anything with the motor changes on the tractor itself. I don't know, but like,
I don't think so, no.
Yeah, I think it just basically makes your car like your truck like a strap-on hybrid, if you will.
It seems a lot like if like the push lawnmowers that are like self-propelled. That's kind of how I envision it probably works, where it's like it detects that like pull, and so the motor kicks in just a little bit to give that extra bit, just like when you're trying to push a mower that's got the self-propelled wheels in the back.
Like perfectly synchronizes with the motion of the vehicle, and then basically just applies just some extra force, right, to take off the load off of the.
It's like an interesting idea. I'm wondering. I have a lot of questions. Just looking at it, I'm wondering how it affects the length requirements, or the length, like just the total vehicle length. How it affects like how much weight you can scale in the trailer. I don't know. I mean, in theory, it's an interesting idea, right? And I know it can be used. I'm pretty sure like the unit itself can be used to like pull trailers around like a yard and stuff like that. Or the thing the thing can drive itself, can it?
So that was one of the points that I brought up on Tuesday, which was that I think if it doesn't already, right, if the truck detaches from this, what do they call it? Electric semi-power module. If it detaches from this power module, then the power module has to kind of be able to stand on its own, right? So at least it's going to have like retractable landing legs. And you can just clearly envision that like a future version or future iteration of this is that those retractable legs end up kind of acting like landing gear on a plane, where there will be a wheel attached to it. And once there's a wheel attached to it, now all of a sudden it could potentially like move itself. And when it comes to like why I kind of wanted to bring this up after the the Wabi announcement or like the self-driving truck topic earlier, is that one of the key difficulties around actually deploying self-driving trucks in production really is doing, like, if you do a full leg between two warehouses, right? The part that the driver's always really been absolutely critical and necessary for is getting out of the truck, backing up the truck, opening up the doors, to the trailer so that you can actually dock, going in and retracting the landing gear, taking off, the hoses as well. I guess that might still be the case here. You still might need to take off hoses. I don't know actually if they have hoses attached to this thing. It might look like they do. But
Glad hands.
glad hands. And this could technically act as a yard vehicle itself. So to Reed's point, that it could potentially be at least low speed driving.
I mean, this thing is, I mean, probably right now. I mean, there's a bunch of questions where they're going to charge these. Like, are these going to be, because it makes a ton of sense to me, and this probably connects to just self-driving in general, but like, if you're on the highway and you've got 500 miles to drive per day and you're going in a straight line, why would you not want to press a button that puts you on like a self-driving autopilot? And that sounds great. If you're driving in a straight line for 500 miles and you can hook up to this thing and all else remains the same, you could still scale the same weight. There's no length restrictions, and you can automatically just get 120 miles per gallon. Okay, great. Why would you not want to do it? You're not going to be adding, this thing's probably adding another 15, 20 feet to your length. You're not going to be driving that into fucking Chicago to deliver a load. You know what I mean? So this thing is, this is, I mean, I respect everyone who's into self-driving. I know it's a very it's like an engineering task, right? And it's very interesting in that sense. But just the practical implementations of it, like, I don't just focus on the damn part where it makes the most sense right now, which is literally just when you're on the highway, right? Like, everybody's So that makes a lot of sense to me, I guess. I just don't like, where are these things going to charge? Like, there's just much, which there aren't reasons why it won't work. I mean, maybe it is, but that's not how I'm not asking those questions, to try to say it won't work. I think it's an interesting idea. I don't know.
It's kind of an interesting stepping stone to self-driving too, because if you've got these units that, carriers are already forced to go, they're gonna have to make an extra stop potentially, right, to get one of these and hook it all up, right? And you've already got something that can hook onto the trailers that's electric. Like, I feel like once you get self-driving trucks in place, it feels pretty easy to swing in and be like, the battery pack will just do the whole thing now, right? Like, it'll just take it all the way there.
Yeah, I don't know if it will do like inner city driving, but I don't see a reason maybe it couldn't.
Yeah, it's another interesting idea. That looks like I-10 behind there, right? That looks like driving from Phoenix to LA. So it makes a lot of sense.
Actually,
dead straight
to the weather point that was brought up earlier. All these self-driving truck companies, have been testing on the south quarter of the United States, and it's because the weather there is, much more reliable. It's pretty much
the weather's more reliable. There's more space. Like, it's just a friendlier environment, quote unquote.
100%.
I don't know. I mean, it's.
So
I guess
there was one other variant of this too, which is from a company called Range Energy, and the trailer itself essentially has a battery pack, and then it acts as a kind of additive propulsion system to the tandem wheels of the trailer. And they're claiming that it achieves 67% fuel efficiency gains. So that will be less than 120 miles per gallon. But at the same time, there used to actually be, do you guys know this company called Hyliion? Have you guys heard of them before? They've been on What the Truck a couple of times.
Yeah, I've seen him.
Thomas Healy, I think is his name. Anyway, they started off actually doing this in the very beginning of their journey before they actually went out down the road of kind of doing like a hybrid, like a insert for the drivetrain and making kind of adding an electric motor into the drivetrain of the cab. But it seems like Range Energy came out again with kind of another attempt at this. And I've spoken with the founder. Actually, that was like one of my biggest one of the biggest mistakes I made was like we tried recording that podcast with him literally twice, and the audio didn't work either time, and I was so upset about it. But because it was actually a really good interview. He was formerly actually on one of the original Tesla employees actually too. So he's like working on the Model S battery system as well back in the day, and then he went out and started this company itself. So this stuff's pretty
How do
cool.
these, so kind of going back to even the last company, like how do they all charge? Like, do they have like places you've got to go to and they just have to have like distribution across the country for it? Or they're like, is there a third party somewhere that's doing this or what?
That whatever the hell it's called, Revoy. I mean, I imagine they're going to need infrastructure just like Tesla does.
Yeah.
So, like they're going to need probably the same thing. I don't.
So there's
if they're being used on the highway predominantly, then you're going to need to have like a yard, like a lot to pull into off the highway that somebody's going to have to hook it up. I don't know, man.
I haven't heard Range Energy really kind of hone in on regenerative braking like Hyliion did in the past. But basically, I'll start with Hyliion. Hyliion was basically saying that you don't ever actually have to charge this thing, because what it would do was the truck would capture energy from the truck and essentially the back tandem wheels would act as a engine brake in a way. And if you turn any electric motor, it actually starts to act as a power generator. So when you would start to go downhill, it would start actually capturing the energy from the truck, kind of like from the motion of the vehicle, and start to replenish the battery energy. But what they actually found out over time was that there just wasn't enough like hilly like variation throughout the United States for that to actually, have like a legit business case. And that's why I think they ended up pivoting. Now, I haven't heard Range Energy at least talk a lot about the regenerative braking side of things. And I think the reason is because they kind of might have learned that from Hyliion. And so I think from what I've heard so far is that there will be a charging, kind of ecosystem, and it might be planted at the warehouses themselves. If a company wants to kind of like own more control of its supply chain, maybe own some of its trailers, or maybe rent some of its trailers from Range, if that's what their ultimate business model is going to be. I don't actually know. I'm just totally guessing right now. But you can charge at the warehouse. Like that would be the most sensible place to charge.
I'm gonna leave this entire issue to all the nerds to figure out, because it makes me want to fall asleep.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. What else?
But the only reason I say that is because and that's not a knock on it. I believe in the long-term vision, obviously. And I think it would be great if we could get 120 miles per gallon and drivers could save money on fuel, and go further with less. That's awesome. I'm sure. That makes a lot of sense. But I just feel like it's so, I don't know. It's easy to spin our wheels on that kind of stuff. And anyway,
all good.
Sorry. Christian can nerd out about self-driving trucks for a million hours. Which I understand because you worked on.
Well, we said this was going to be like more technical type discussions for this episode at least. We won't do this all the time, but
what's I don't know what else is interesting? What else is technical that's interesting? What else is going on? I mean, we've had a couple different demo type AI demo people come through the Discord and, show off various kind of implementations of like inbox apart. I don't know what you call it, like an inbox hookup or
what do you guys think about this? So what do you guys think about those? We had Drew from Axel do a demo on Tuesday. He was basically he presented an Outlook plugin reading your emails from your customers, and was able to plug in with like green screens, coding engines, and kind of automatically do like a automatic responses, as well as some scheduling stuff. And what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Garrett, you go first.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting. I actually think like freight tech in general is kind of in a weird state, and it all kind of comes back to like what a TMS is, I think, ultimately. This might sound weird, but basically I think where it's at is people are sort of split on what a TMS is actually doing inside of an organization. Like, a lot of people are saying like TMS mostly is just doing like accounting at the end of the day. Other people are saying, no, it's really helping me run freight. Other people are saying, no, I'm actually doing 90% of my job out of my email inbox. And so I think a lot of these like email kind of plugins and systems that are like these add-ons are taking it and saying like, hey, we think that a TMS isn't really like helping quite as much on like the actual your day-to-day. And so we're going to come to where you're at and come to your email box and like give you the tooling that you need out of your TMS directly in your email box. So I think that's why we've seen so many of them. One thing that I think is interesting about it is even within that, there is sort of a difference in like how they're doing it. Like, I think some of the demos we've seen, it's like the little like plugin is like literally a TMS crammed into a third of your screen, basically. Like, it's like everything you would see in a TMS, but like just in a third of your screen. Yeah. And then others are taking it more of like truly just like an assistant where you can like ask it for help on something, or it'll automatically reply to a specific email. But I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to like, I think the industry is kind of torn. I'm like, do we want TMSs? What do we want TMSs to do? Like, do we want to just make sure they're like the auditability factor here and making sure that accounting and things are getting paid? Or do we want to actually have like the TMS is helping you run freight and want people working out of your TMS? I think it's kind of scattered right now. And I think as a result, we're seeing a lot more like, directly in the email inbox solutions. And then we see TMSs without the accounting piece at all. They're just focusing on like, we're just going to help you run good freight. And then other TMSs that are almost just accounting solutions. It's just kind of like across the board. I think it's like worse now, honestly, than I've seen it like since I've been in freight tech. It was just like so scattered. So
in terms of offerings that people can have, like in terms of what the TMSs can do itself.
As far as sort of where a broker does like their work and like what software that they use, it seems like it's gotten worse where like the types of software that a freight broker might use could vary from like, I just work out of my email box to all the way to like, no, I use like this system and it automates 90% of it. It's like everywhere in between right now. It's all over the place, which is interesting for, other freight tech companies are then also kind of caught in that poll of like, when you go to try to build something for a freight brokerage, like how they operate is not only like, are their workflows different, but their tech is like could be completely different. Like, they could just be working out of their email box. They could be working at a TMS. Like, it's all over the place right now, honestly.
That's why everyone's always talking about like brokers shouldn't build their own tech, yada yada. I haven't thought this through, so I'm gonna say it, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I just don't buy that at all. I just don't. Like, if I were starting a brokerage right now, like, it's just, I'm not saying you should, like, should they build tech and then try to productize it and sell it to other people? Maybe that's like complicates things tremendously, but like, I don't know, man. Like, there's just, you know how you work, and if you can build tools that are perfectly tailored for what you do, which is very difficult to do to get off the shelf, because there's always because Garrett building Load Partner is always going to have to keep in mind a bunch of different people when he builds stuff, and so necessarily that means it won't be exactly how XYZ company works, right? Which will hurt adoption when it's actually implemented and it's in a rep's hands, and they have to make the decision between pressing a button and having a robot call versus doing it themselves. Like if I put myself back in the shoes of myself, you know, in 2018, moving, you know, 200, 150 loads a week, dude, I wouldn't use any of it. I wouldn't use any of it. Like I had my way of working, and they were always introducing tools to us, and I didn't use any of it. None of it. None of it. And it's like, because the one time it gets something wrong, the one time it calls my driver and screws something up and I have to clean up a mess, I'm going to be pissed. I'm going to turn it off, because I'd rather do it. If you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. So so satisfying that kind of high, really, really high bar of utility is so difficult for a company to build for a bunch of people. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so hard. It's so hard. That doesn't mean it's impossible. I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm not saying it won't work. It's just going to take a lot of work and a lot of iterations, and just, it's not going to be for everybody. And your market is necessarily it's just going to be so difficult to sell long term and to get adoption, because it's just really hard. And it's going to take a ton of cycles.
We've seen a lot of differences too, in like the size of brokerage matters a lot. And like, you know, talking about like, if you're running your own freight, or if you're handing like the track and trace portion of it off to an external team, or even a team within your company, like just even that part of it is so different. Really, like brokerage to brokerage, where like,
for sure,
you know, it's, like you said, like exactly what you said, right? We've had people that have been like, hey, like, when we get a load, like I go to like a website for our text messaging. It's like a third party thing entirely, and I put in the driver's number and I send them a text. And then there's other people that are like, I just want to like send an email to load partner to import a load. And other people are like, we have to have an integration with our TMS. And it's all over the place. And I think you're right. I think there's definitely benefits with, you know, building your own TMS isn't always the wrong choice necessarily. You just have to really look at, you know, the size of the scale of business you're doing, kind of how your team makeup looks, or if it's a new brokerage, you know, what kind of workflows you want in place, and look at the offerings that are out there. There's a lot of them. Like even now with Load Partner, we're going through all, you know, demoing with people and finding new partners. And it's like every week I still discover a new TMS. I'm like, I've been in this industry for over 10 years and I've never heard of you. And it's like, oh yeah, we've been around for like 7 years. Like, there's just so many that like, it's impossible.
So I think there's one thing that should be outlined, which is that there's proof around building your own tech and being a brokerage, where it was the amount of cost that you'd incur to build that tech would seriously offset your profit margins to the extent where the business wasn't sustainable, because it required a lot of engineering resources to actually build that technology in-house. Now, if we take a look at what's been taking place over the last year, 2 years, with a lot of this generative AI, okay, if I write code right now, or a lot of people that, you know, work with us, or friends that I know, you're now using tools that help you write code much faster.
Yeah.
And I think that what actually is going to be a big change, and could actually make it more feasible for companies to build more tech in-house, is this ability, through a lot of usage in AI, to do and create a lot more with much fewer people. And so I think that
is the only thing that matters.
That is the only thing that matters. And if you can do that,
more with less leverage is all, like, that's what this is all for.
Yeah. And so if you can keep your profit margins basically the same by running a brokerage, right? But you can still have control over your own entire tech stack without hiring, you know, 100 people engineering team to do that, then why the hell wouldn't you do that, right?
So I think, I mean, you make a good point. There's a lot of, you know, things that code is going to get easier and easier to write, right? Like already today, the efficiency gains from like Copilot, right? It's great.
Yeah.
But I think the problem is when you're building a TMS, like those efficiency gains obviously play into, you can build a smaller team. But like when I built the TMS for Integrity Express way back in the day, like our team was like 4 engineers. That was it. Like it was a really small team. And I think ultimately a lot of the overhead of building a TMS and why it takes so long and why it's so expensive actually comes down to like business process. Like, how do you want these things to work? What are the requirements for different pages and flows? And like the AI stuff today will definitely help with, writing code better. It'll probably will shrink the teams a little bit.
That's
but
writing code is not the limiting factor, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, a major portion of that is really just figuring out the process of what you even want to build.
Yeah.
It's very true.
Yeah. Adam wrote that comment, which you put up, but like, I think, like, I'm not speaking for a Fortune 500 brokerage when I say that they should all be building, or even a mid-market or really anybody. All I know is that if I tomorrow were going to start a brokerage, I'd probably just like waste. I'd probably spend a ton of time just, trying to do it myself, just like Adam has done, because he knows exactly what he wants and he builds exactly what he wants. And if I were starting a brokerage and it were small and it were just me and a couple people, like, I'd want to figure it out myself. I just feel like that's when you get what you want, and you look at other options, obviously, to see if there's things you're missing. But like, and again, I'm kind of just talking on my ass here, but I just don't. All of the big brokerages have built their own stuff, all of them.
You use technology and to be creative in coming up with ways to improve your internal processes, to make yourself more efficient, right? And if there's a way that you can come up with a process, if you have an idea for a process that's going to make you more efficient than your competition, you should have the ability to actually go in and implement that. And now, since we're kind of going into this realm of things where you can actually start describing what you want done in English and have that directly translated like into code in the same way you'd translate English.
Can I bring us back? What was our initial point? Was a question on all these inbox tools. Let me just answer this real quick, just to get us back on the rails, because I brought us off the rails. I apologize. Yeah. I would love if an agent could read my inbox and perfectly, or get really, really close to perfect, being able to read an email, every email that comes in, decide what type of email it is. If it's a load update, figure out what load it is, then make the updates, like be able to understand the gobbledygook that drivers often communicate using, just like broken sentences, one-word responses, like all the obscurity, right? Like if it could handle that, and if it could go and make all the updates to the load in the TMS, which is really, I mean, if you think about what the human is doing, all they're doing in these situations is looking at situations, processing kind of inputs, making a decision based on the air in the room, the environment, what's going on, the people they're dealing with, the context, so to speak, and then making a decision, whatever the output is. And if it's a load update, I get an email. Oh, okay, like he said, I'm 15 minutes away. Like, does that mean he's going to be late? Whatever, yada, yada. I'll make that decision, and then I'll go update some, value in a database somewhere. That's all it is. That's all it is. The human is just the human is just able to understand the context much better than machines are right now, right? But there is no reason why a robot couldn't figure it out on a long enough term. Brokerages are already doing this in a sense when they hire operations reps. Like if I get a trainee at a brokerage, I want to tell them how I work, have them sit with me for 6 weeks, start making calls, check calls on all my loads. And as time goes on, he'll build relationships with the carriers. The carriers will start to know who he is. So when he calls for the 600th time, they're not going to be mean to him, because there's just so much that goes on. And if I could just get another me knowing exactly what I know, who I trust, backing me up, reading my emails, updating stuff, making check calls, I would love that, right? That'd be great. That'd be great. And as far as I know, there's no reason why that couldn't happen on a long enough time horizon as you get better at what you're doing, as like a load partner, for example. So, or any of these other tools. If it can get really freaking good and I trust it, and there's always, the one thing Axel did, which I can't remember what exactly Drew said, but it was something along the lines of like human in the loop or something like that. Like the human has to pull the trigger, so to speak. Like maybe that's a good intermediate step. I don't know. I'm kind of just rambling, but
No, that's definitely what we're doing at Load Partner. You know, it's literally that. You know, the track and trace the ops person, the extra you. You know, when in Load Partner you set your preferences on like, you know, how often you want to get a call out for an ETA, or, you know, 2 hours before pickup for this customer, we want to make a call or a text to give the instructions for pickup. And, you know, all that flows back to your TMS, and then, you know, you get emails for exceptions, you know, the human in the loop, right? When something goes wrong, something sideways, it's not sure, you'll get the message saying, hey, the driver looks like they're going to be late. Like, we probably want to intervene here and figure it out. So that's exactly what we're building.
So some inspiration for this is I actually saw some people might know this, but it's a full-fledged email client called Superhuman, and I know a lot of people use this. It's like always been around like quick responses, summarization, contextual information, like what Reed was mentioning, and some just inspiration I think around here, like what direction they're going in, is they've made this experience very multiplayer now. So when you actually get an email, they actually now have like a chat experience that you can actually talk with your team about what is going on. But then they also can like actually summarize these emails, categorize these emails for you. And so I know we're running out on time here, but I just wanted to bring this up real quick because I thought I saw this yesterday, and I really liked kind of like the approach that they were doing. But obviously this is a very generic, you know, approach. They're kind of going after like any market vertical, not what freight specifically. But I do think that there's you know, some potential like inspiration that can be got from the approach that they've taken there. So
I think this is what Front does, right? Isn't that a lot of what Front does, where you can like, you get an inbox, and then basically like emails come in, you can have, I think, a chat experience like regarding an email inside of Front. Like, it's very
maybe they
similar
took
to
it from
this.
Front. Maybe they took it
Yeah.
from Front. So cool. Any final comments, guys? I'll
give Garrett the final word.
Yeah.
No, thanks for having me on. It's fun talking freight tech. Definitely, you know, bring me back on again some other time. We are launching our Load Partner shirts today. So if you go to our
Nice.
website, we have a little merch section in there now, and we'll have
Hell
some
yeah.
stuff going out here any minute with links out to that. So yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. It was fun.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll be back next week, actually with an further automation debate. So tune in next week. That one's actually going to be pretty interesting too.
Sweet.
All right, guys. See you
guys.
next week.
Yeah.